everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stewarts Soundbites. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joined by Sarah Daniel, who is a neurological physiotherapist and clinical director of Motion Rehab. I think it's Yorkshire and Humberside that you cover, Sarah, but yeah, I'm right. Oh, good. And today we've got a really interesting topic of discussion. We're going to talk a little bit, well, a few different things actually, Sarah, because we had an initial chat recently and we couldn't really make up our mind. Well, I couldn't make up my mind, which is absolutely typical, because there were just so many things to cover, but we've only got 15 minutes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Lexo Robotic Gait Trainer, which is a really exciting, innovative bit of kit. And we're going to talk about what intensive rehabilitation means, because we hear it all the time, and we're going to talk a wee bit about fatigue at the end. But to start us off, Sarah, you're going to play a video for us, I think.
Yeah, so I'll share a video with you which just gives you a bit of an overview about what we've been doing in Motion Rehab, and it really explains this idea of intensive rehabilitation.
The intensive rehabilitation programs at Motion Rehab are available to individuals who may have suffered from a stroke, a spinal cord injury, a head injury, traumatic brain injury, children with cerebral palsy, and we also see individuals who've had complex polytrauma, so lots of broken bones that then need rehabbing to get back to day-to-day function. Research will tell you the more you do, the better you get, and that's how the brain learns, and it's how it rewires itself after injury, illness or disease. So we were looking at our current rehabilitation practice and realised that 1 hour a week or 2 hour a week just seems really inadequate to help patients get better after these kind of conditions. I've always had an interest in rehabilitation technologies and where that fits within the industry, and that's where the idea for this Motion Rehab Intensive Rehab Centre was conceived. That if we combine highly skilled, highly specialist hands-on therapy with rehabilitation technologies, patients can do the high repetition, intensive practice they need to make the changes to help them get better quicker. And that's what the research evidence suggests, and actually what we're seeing in practice here is it really works.
I believe physiotherapy is about repetition. Avace's balance and his core has come on, never seen it like that before. Yeah. He's found the independence of walking. The technology here has brought that on. It has to be the technology, because I don't think there's anything else that we've not tried.
What's unique about Motion Rehab is that our robotics and VR suite is here permanently for patients to use. Patients need to do high repetitions and lots of practice in a dynamic environment. So the selection of the devices that I've chosen here are not bits of equipment that patients or clients come and try and then buy to have at home. The rehabilitation with the robotics and VR is an integral part of the program that the patients undertake here. During their therapy, they'll have 1 hour a day of hands-on traditional rehabilitation techniques, and the other remaining 3 hours a day is using the technology supported by our clinicians to do the high repetitions that they need. And their movements are evaluated, and we modify the program bespoke to each patient to make sure that they're achieving what is specific for them.
They treat everybody as an individual, which I find really important. My legs are stronger. My core is really strong now.
I think one of my proudest moments was being recognised by Google and the Financial Times as an innovator in our industry, incorporating digital innovation to really disrupt and change our industry. Besides those accolades, the best thing for me is actually seeing that this vision works. The more we see our patients succeed, the more satisfying our jobs are. It might be the smallest of things. They suddenly can stand up for the first time, they can open their fingers for the first time. But when that leads into being able to eat and drink on their own, be able to go back to their own home, to manage to go to the toilet by themselves, those are huge wins from tiny little steps of rehab to get them there.
They finally started training my body, training my brain to remember how to do basic things, and they've basically just given me my second chance to have my life back again.
I think I saw that video online, Sarah, and it actually was kind of the starting point for me, and I tracked you down and asked you to do this session because I found it really striking actually how the robotics, I guess, and the bits of kit that you have available were really quite striking. And I think motion rehab kind of operates within the confines of a really kind of technologically advanced field in neuro rehab. And I picked up specifically on the Lexo Robotic Gait Trainer that we're going to talk about because I didn't know much about it. So maybe you could tell us a wee bit about it.
So you'll have seen the video there was taken at our clinic in Leeds. And as I said, it was all about incorporating technology, not something that people try and buy, but it becomes integral. And what this technology allows is the patients to practice, but they're given challenges. It makes them engaging and dynamic. And just the success of the clinic and the demand on rehabilitation, particularly in the last 12 months, given maybe the demands on the NHS, but COVID and managing that have meant that some of the rehabilitation services have really struggled. So we see that we're collaborating. So it gave us the opportunity to open another clinic in Hull. And since we opened in Leeds, the Lexo has been developed, and it's a device that allows people to practice high repetitions of stepping, but it has lots of biofeedback. So the patient can see what they're doing, they can see when they've got their foot on the ground, they can see whether they're making contact with their heel, they can walk in a virtual environment. And it just means then that you're practicing stepping and the patient's getting the feedback in a way that they don't overland. I've got a little video that will show you somebody walking on the ground, and if we have them walking backwards and forwards in the gym, what that would look like. And then actually what the difference is if you put them on a gait trainer, which allows them to do stepping in a normal pattern. And it really emphasizes very clearly why we use this technology to help people get better. So we're in a position where instead of maybe that patient taking, or even some of our very dependent patients who've maybe not had the opportunity to walk because of the level of their injury, instead of it taking 2 or 3 members of staff, they have their body weight supported and we can control how much weight they put through their limbs, but then they're allowed to practice the movement of walking and stepping, which then in lay terms is triggering muscle memory, it's creating neuroplasticity, it's firing up those parts of the brain and the nervous system to remember what that's like, and essentially you can rewire the nervous system to do that. And for us, it means the difference between someone taking 100 steps in a session to taking 2,000-3,000 steps. And I think some of the research is suggesting you need to be doing about 1,000 to 1,500 steps a day for it to actually have any kind of rehabilitation effects.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the people that are supporting others, you know, the physiotherapists, for example, when you're just walking on the ground, you see 2 or 3 people supporting a person to try and do such a small number of steps. And it's fatiguing for the person who's doing the stepping and the people that are supporting that person as well.
Yeah, I think it's the physios that usually get tired first. And some of my colleagues that might be listening, it's not uncommon to have, you've pulled the short straw if you're the person on your knees kind of dragging yourself along the floor, or we sit squatted on skateboards, so you're trying to help someone step their leg and then you're scurrying along the floor. You've got one person either side to make sure they don't fall down, someone behind with a wheelchair. So actually the demands on the therapist, this equipment not only helps the patient, but it helps the therapist, and we can stand back and we can still put our hands on. I feel really strongly that it's not an either or. It's not robotics and technology or therapists and traditional approaches. The two have to work together. One of my colleagues has got a saying that the suite of equipment does the square root of nothing without us in there. That you can't just stick somebody on a machine and press go. That's not what it's about. It provides us with an extra pair of hands and allows patients to do so much more than we've done before.
Yeah. And when we spoke originally, Sarah, I said to you, well, I presume that the Lexo Gait Trainer is for, pretty able-bodied clients, because, the range of motion that you see there is quite impressive. And I presume that, for example, a high-level spinal cord injury person, it's not something that they could use. And you corrected me on that.
Yeah, so you get, I mean, essentially, if you can stand someone even with in a standing frame, or you can stand someone between multiple therapists, this person's secured in a harness and they're supported, their body weight is supported, and we can control that. So if you've got someone who's a very dependent client, you can provide them lots of support. And the Lexo is slightly different to the device that we have in Leeds, in that it provides even more support than the one in Leeds. And we can control how much vertical movement the person does, so they're kind of bobbing when they walk. And we can control how much weight they take from side to side, so you can then accommodate maybe asymmetries in a patient. And you can get somebody who's never even stood, or they're just at the point of standing, even with huge amounts of support, up and taking steps. And we can control the range of movement. So you might not want someone to take really long steps, or they don't quite have the capabilities in their range to do that, but you can then work towards it. But because it's such a natural pattern, it really does facilitate movement that patients suddenly go, oh, that's what it feels like. And it has, huge benefits.
Yeah. And when we spoke, I remember you said to me on the phone, you said, that you had a client who could manage maybe, 5 or 6 steps on the floor, and then got onto the Lexo and was able to do an hour of stepping or something. It's really quite remarkable.
Because we can control, because what the robotics allow us to do is that we can control so many parameters and provide support at different parts of the walking. Where patients really struggle is usually if they have difficulties or weakness or spasticity or range of movement problems. Walking is exceptionally effortful for them, so their bodies fatigue very quickly. If you can take that away, even if it's just de-weighting them and taking some of their body weight away, and they're only kind of supporting 30% of their own body weight, they've automatically got more energy to do more. But I also feel really strongly that we are sometimes too cautious with our client base, and that we're not as ambitious as we could be. And that's one thing that we can use this technology for. We can push patients to achieve so much more than maybe you think they're capable of. You'll have heard in the video that we have our patients training for 4 hours a day, not back to back. We give them rest and we provide them with refreshments. we don't crack the whip quite that hard. But to be fair, the patients want to work more than I think it's the physios that want a tea break before the patients, because when they suddenly realise what they can achieve, it's really rewarding, and they get so much feedback from using this equipment. It tells them whether they've done it right or wrong, that they want to keep going. And I suppose one of the criticisms is about fatigue, whether patients can tolerate this, and actually they can. And I think we've just had maybe an approach to rehab where we're very cautious. We don't want to make people tired. And I think we need to, as an industry, start thinking about what is fatigue and what is tiredness, and make a difference between the two. And if someone gets tired, I've done my job. I'm quite happy. They can sleep and rest later. If they're pushing into fatigue, and that's when you start to see, for me, a deterioration in their performance, whether that's cognitive or physical, that's when you rest or you change the task. It doesn't mean that you stop. And I think that's really important in the way that we approach our rehabilitation. So be respectful of fatigue, but not too cautious of it, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and I wanted to touch on this term, the intensive rehabilitation, because we've talked about, well, we hear the term all the time, and when we spoke about it, you kind of had a different, you said it's a term that we use all the time, but what does it actually mean? And you had quite an interesting take on that. So
I think what's interesting, before we did open the intensive centre, it wasn't something that you heard banded around too much. The guys at Queen Square doing an upper limb programme were the first ones to lead on this. And now we hear intensive rehab a lot. my personal opinion is that it's very difficult to deliver intensive rehab without this technology, because it's not about the time that you're in therapy. It's not just saying, well, you can do 3 hours. It's about what you do in that time that counts. And what we know is that there needs to be repetition, there needs to be mass practice. And so coming in and maybe doing a more traditional approach where you might do 10 repetitions, have a rest, 10 repetitions, we're working in the hundreds and thousands of repetitions. Yeah. And to me, that's what intensity is. It's not just hours, it's about the reps that you do within those hours that are important.
And how do you manage it when you've got a client who's been there for a couple of hours and is saying to you, I'm absolutely knackered? For you, I guess it's as you said, it's differentiating between that. Are they tired or are they actually fatigued?
Do you know, it's really interesting that obviously we bespoke the program to each individual and we take their individual needs. So you can tweak and change and meet. But I think if you came and visited the centre, and obviously people are more than welcome to as and when restrictions allow, these patients can really tolerate it. The patients are wanting to do it. And we've got very few patients who go, that's it, I'm done, I can't take any more. And actually, as clinicians, if we get to that point, we've not done our job correctly because we've not been dealing with the individual needs of the patient. What you find is the patient's actually asking, I want to do some more, I want to do some more. And we're actually telling them, no, it's now your time to rest, have a bit of a break. But for some patients, it might be that they start with a couple of hours and they build up. But we have some clients, one gentleman that comes in, he does 6 hours of therapy a day. This is a full-time job. But you have to remember that if someone can only tolerate 1 hour of physical activity, many of the people that you and I work with, that's how long it takes them to get washed and dressed in the morning. So if we're only skilling them to have the endurance and exercise tolerance for 1 hour of physical activity, once they're dressed, that's then done for the rest of the day. We're not equipping them to live life, to engage in leisure activities, social activities. So we do need to build the exercise tolerance for these individuals and be mindful of what they can and can't do. But absolutely, patients can manage 1,000 steps walking. We've got patients who walk 5,000 steps in an hour. We've got patients that can do 100 repetitions of opening and closing their hands. And all the while they're getting the feedback of whether they're doing it right, whether they're doing it wrong. That's the joys of the technology. We can see when their performance deteriorates and we think, well, hang on a second, they are fatiguing. Let's change the task. Let's do something different. And if they're struggling physically, you change them cognitively. If they're struggling cognitively, you do physical.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gutted, Sarah, because we're out of time. I'm so sorry. It's so great to hear from you, though, and I'm going to make sure that there's a link to I think we can access the video online, and there's really good overview of the Lexo online as well. So I'll make sure that the links are posted at the end of this recording so people can access them. And as usual, we don't have time for questions. We never do. But if anybody has any questions or queries, then you can get in touch with me, and with Sarah will provide your details as well, Sarah, so that people can be contacted if they've got any follow-up queries.
And always welcome to visit. That's fine. Just drop us an email.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you ever so much, Sarah, and thank you everybody for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you again next Wednesday, 1 o'clock. Thank you. Bye.